Morning. So, following the Highland Park shooting on 4th of July, predictably saw a lot of comments comparing Jayland Walker and the outcome there with the 4th of July shooter, which is disappointing, but not unexpected. And of course, every time something like this happens, I mean, it's very easy to falsify the claims. Well, you know, if he were another race, this would have ended up a different way. And it's not a great comparison between Jayland Walker and the 4th of July shooter. And I think a better comparison is actually the Waukesha massacre around Christmas, on a number of levels, right? They were both parades. One was a Christmas parade, one was a 4th of July parade. And there was a similar number of injuries and fatalities. I think it was like 6 or 7 in each case. And then the only real differences there, I mean, other than time and place and all those things, but I mean that, you know, kind of the broad strokes are, you know, the ethnicity of the suspect. The 4th of July was white, and then Waukesha was black, and then the implement used, right? And nobody talks about Waukesha anymore because a gun was not involved. And I know I made a video referencing this previously, but Waukesha used a vehicle, right? And so that just kind of goes into the memory hole. But I'll put a link in the description to the suspect from the Waukesha attack being taken into custody. And I mean, it's really simple. It's a short clip. The cops roll up, they say, put up your hands. The guy puts up his hands and they take him into custody, and that's it, right? And like I said, I mean, similar circumstances, right? Parades, similar injuries, similar number of fatalities, right? And so it puts the lie to the narrative, right? Which is frustrating, but it, you know, it's not going to get the airtime that it deserves because folks in the media have an agenda, and they're advocating for certain policy positions and utilizing tragic events to advance a political agenda, which is sad and ridiculous, but you know, that's the world we live in. Beyond that, what drives me nuts, what I find just disgusting about the media reaction to this tragic event, is the just blanket of images and videos and discussion of the shooter, right? And in the last video I did on Uvalde, you know, I wrestled with the kind of the phenomena generally, right? And what are we missing in our analysis of these events? And something I didn't really hit that hard in that video or at all, I don't remember exactly, was the media perspective. And I think that's a big piece to this puzzle. You know, my immediate reaction to all of the airtime that it gets in media with this person's image and his name being plastered everywhere was, stop it, right? Don't say his name. Don't post his photo. Don't link to his social media. Don't signal boost his online presence. Don't romanticize him, right? Because that's what it is. It's romanticization. And I don't mean in a, you know, amorous sort of way. I mean, clearly people have a morbid fascination, which I understand to an extent. I mean, you go on any streaming service, and God, how many shows are there about psycho killers and, you know, mass murderers, all these sorts of characters where people have this morbid fascination. And I think there's, you know, a evolutionary reason why that tickles our fancy to a certain extent. I mean, humans want to look evil and irrationality in the eye and make sense of it. And, out of a sense of self-preservation, like, what would I do were I confronted with this person, this situation? How would I survive? And that's an understandable impulse. But the trap that we are finding ourselves in is, of course, this global mass media environment, which are, relatively primitive primate brains are just not adapted to inhabit. And we're really, adapted to exist in, small familial groups of like dozens or maybe hundreds. And instead, we exist in a society of millions and billions. And so that has this isolating effect on individuals, where we aren't accountable to each other, right? We have this sort of anonymizing effect of mass media. And then, we get inundated, flooded with content. So, rather than the talk of the town being, a couple dozen or a couple hundred people about, a significant event that happened in our small locality, maybe, once in a blue moon, once in a decade, once in a lifetime, right? Instead have week to week tragedies across the country, across the world, being blasted into your, awareness from all these different media outlets. And it, I'm not the first person to point out this effect where, we have this, kind of frequency bias, where we overestimate the significance or importance of events based on the frequency that we interact with that information, and it doesn't really help us kind of contextualize it in the broader, statistical sort of sense, right? And how statistically significant these events are. So that's a problem. And then, if you look at the shooter, and again, don't say his name, don't blast his image. I mean, if you're really curious, it's out there, you can look. But don't amplify this person. But that said, I mean, if you get a read on who this person seems to be, all things considered, and both sides of the political spectrum want to kind of assign him to the other side, and that's a whole nother ridiculous ball of wax, but this person seems emblematic of just, an attention-seeking media culture. And when I say, when we're trying to understand the phenomena and we're missing a big piece here in media, that's what I'm talking about, right? Is this attention-seeking sickness that people seem to have. Now, maybe that's a little ironic for me, putting a camera in front of my face and talking out loud for, the couple dozen people that care to listen. But this is me just thinking out loud. And you want to listen, fine. If you don't, I don't particularly care. I'm going to continue doing it regardless. But what I'm driving at here is think of all of these major, high-profile school shootings in particular, and how many names that you know, right? How many even faces that you would recognize, going back at least as far as Columbine, right? And you say that name, Columbine, I mean, it evokes a certain kind of visceral, emotional reaction, and anybody who was alive and, had any level of awareness at that time knows who the shooters were, knows things about the incident, because it was kind of, in recent memory, the first big one, right? And so this media culture, this media environment that we find ourselves in, right? And this sickness that people are suffering with, this attention-seeking sickness, I think you're getting an amplifying effect when you have media making these people famous or infamous, right, and romanticizing them, as I put it, in the same way that Ted Bundy's been romanticized. And I think it's just profoundly unhelpful if your goal is to try and stop these events. And I asked the question in the Uvalde, video. I mean, why this particular thing? Especially with schools or small children. Or in this case, it was a parade, but regardless, I mean, it's a lone gunman usually preying upon a crowd of defenseless people, usually young people, and it's like, what about the psychology of that makes sense, but I think as senseless as it is, it makes more sense in the context of the mass media environment that we're in this attention-seeking sickness that so many people are suffering from. And this person, and the Highland Park shooting in particular, Ellie, I think is emblematic of that. In that, and I said this in the Uvalde video too, you seem to get a slew of these in rapid succession, right? When you get a big one like that. Come on, man. Good grief. Wow. Okay. You seem to get a slew of them in rapid succession when you get a big one like the Uvalde one that gets highly publicized, right? And I think these isolated people in this massive kind of media ocean who are disconnected from reality and social connection, in just profoundly isolated, despite the constant inundation of media information, will more often tend to latch on to that romanticization or infamous publicization of the shooter, right? And I'm not saying that's a common reaction per se, but you got to think, in a country of 300 billion, in a world of so many billions, right? If you blast this person's face all over media, if you plaster his name everywhere, if you go into in-depth analysis about his, background, his youth, his formative years, his, social media presence, and amplify and make famous or infamous this person, you're going to get copycats, right? You're going to get those disaffected, isolated, mentally unwell people looking in that and saying, I want that, right? And it doesn't take a lot. It only takes a handful. But again, when you play a numbers game like that, and you've got millions and billions of people, and only a few who are going to react that way, it doesn't take a lot, and you get, again, these tragedies in rapid succession. And I'm not saying that necessarily that is the only answer. I think there's a lot we still are not grasping about the psychology of these events, but I really firmly believe that is an important piece to this. And so I cannot say this enough. Like, don't say his name. Don't post his photo. Don't make them famous, right? These people need to disappear into the ether, right, of our memories, right? They need to not exist in our consciousness anymore. They need to be erased from our memories, to discourage the copycats who want to make a name for themselves because they feel isolated and unheard. And our incentives are horrifically misaligned with what our goals are, right? Our goals are to stop these events. And these incentives that we're creating in this attention-seeking culture are bass-ackwards. Anyway, that's my opinion on the situation anywhere, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Am I onto something here? I don't think I'm covering new ground here. I am trying to make sense of a crazy world just like everybody else. So please join in the discussion. Drop a comment below. Help me make sense of this. Help yourself make sense of this. Like the video if you enjoyed. Feel free to subscribe. Share the video with anybody you think might be interested. It's been fun, inspiring, and uplifting as always. We'll see you on the next one.